Are Rhys Hoskins, Blake Snell, and Jung-Hoo Lee legitimate targets for the Mariners this offseason? And does Seattle need to spend a specific amount of money to appease the fan base? We'll answer that and more coming up here on Mailbag Monday. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Monday, October 9th, 2023. This is Trident Gonzales and Colby Patnode for the Locked On Mariners podcast, brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB. $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, the lowest price, guaranteed. Thank you so much for making us your first listen. Subscribe, like, and turn on alerts if you're watching on YouTube, or subscribe and leave a 5-star review on your preferred podcast platform if you like what you hear. And if you're part of the crew and rock with us every single day, let us know in the comments below. And if you want to hear from us even more, please consider signing up for our Patreon. You now get a free 7-day trial to check out the show. The link, as well as our social accounts, is in the description of this episode. This is Mailbag Monday, the show where we answer your Mariners questions. And we're going to begin here with Evan, who wants to know what will be the Mariners' plan. Marco Gonzales. Colby?
I don't know. Hope he retires. No. So Marco under contract for one more year. This is last year of his deal. He will not be re-signed. That's pretty much locked in. He's going to make $12 million. You kind of can't. I mean, you could DFA him, but there's really no reason to at this stage because he's solid pitching depth. You're not going to get anything via trade unless you find a bad contract for bad contract swap. Kind of seems unlikely, but so I think what the Mariners are going to do is they're going to bring him into spring training, see how he looks, make sure he's healthy, and he'll. I think we might see a 6-man rotation early in the year, and that's more about protecting Miller and Wu as they get going. But Marco's stuff doesn't play up in the bullpen at all. And despite Marco's struggles the last few years, in like 80% of his starts, he's going at least 6 innings, which, if you go 6 innings and you give up 5 runs, that's not good. But how many times this year did we see somebody give up 5 runs in 2 1/3 and they couldn't get out of the third? So the Mariners had to go and use their bullpen. So at the very least, when Marco gets lit up, he gets lit up pretty efficiently. So I think the plan is just to roll with him into next year and see how everybody looks. And it's possible they could trade him. But again, that's a bad contract swap type of thing. And if you're going to do that, don't you value Marco's leadership? Don't you value Marco's, dependability in that rotation more than whatever you could possibly get in trade for him? And it doesn't make sense to DFA him until at the very least the end of spring training. Make sure everybody's healthy. Make sure you're ready to go. Make sure you have depth at that spot before you do anything with him. So I think this is Marco's last year. It would be amazing if you could find 2020 Marco somewhere in the next few months, but this will be his last year in Seattle. And I think he's probably going to start the year on the opening day roster. How long he lasts, how long does Seattle go to a 6-man, kind of probably depends on, how well he's pitching and also the health of everybody else in your rotation. So it's probably Marco's last year. He's been a great Mariner, but I don't think he's in danger of getting DFA'd or anything like that this winter.
Yeah, I just have a very hard time imagining that this team will eat that money.
I mean, it's not even about the money, although obviously that plays a factor, but it's just like, why DFA him now? Like, you don't get them more money if you DFA him now than if you do in March, and there's just no reason to.
Yeah.
See what he's got.
Yeah, so I think he'll be on this roster, whether it be as part of a 6-man rotation or as the Mariners' number 5 starter if they trade someone like Miller or Wu.
Mm-hmm. Definitely.
Next question here comes from Hater, who wants to know, do you guys see Blake Snell as an option on the market that we could use? Would be nice to get some depth back and maybe send off Miller, Wu, and or Hancock for some bats. Colby, what do you think about Blake Snell making his return to the Pacific Northwest?
Love the player. Love how much he wants to be in Seattle. He hasn't been shy about that. He streams and he talks about how much he would love to pitch on, he streams video games and he talks about how much he loves the Pacific Northwest and how it's his home and how he wants to pitch for the Mariners. So I love players who want to be here, and Snell's a pretty cool dude too. So from all that standpoint, I'd love to have him, but there are some red flags with Snell. He's not a guy who's, been free of injuries in recent years. He's coming off of a bit of a career year. He's probably going to cost more, $100 million or more. How many of those type of arms can you house on your payroll? And he does still struggle with walks. He's a bit of a nibbler. So, 13% walk rate last year, I think. It's pretty high. So he's a good pitcher. He's not a great pitcher. I fear you might have to pay him like he's a great pitcher because he's probably going to win the Cy Young Award.
Yeah.
And so I think it's at least a Robbie Ray contract. And Robbie Ray is, when you compare like durability, Ray versus Snell, it's not really a contest. So I just, as much as I love Blake Snell, I don't see them doing it, even if they trade Miller or Wu, because I think they would just say, we'll just go get Michael Wacha for 1 and 12 instead of Snell for 5 and 125 or whatever.
Yeah, I've heard some rumblings that Snell does have his sights kind of set on Seattle, would love to be a Mariner, but I just don't know if the organization itself will explore that to make that a serious possibility. But the idea itself of trading one of your pitchers to go get the bat or bats you need, and then supplementing the loss of that pitcher on the free agent market makes a ton of sense, because this is a bad free agent market for hitters, but a pretty good one for pitchers. So if you can make that happen, then yeah, I think that's a great avenue to take with your offseason. I just don't think that if they do enact that strategy, that they're going to do it on that kind of high end with someone like Blake Snell, because you're talking about a very similar situation contract wise, and even just coming off of the last year, looks very similar to Robbie Ray's Cy Young season in a few ways. So I think that's a little too rich for the Mariners' blood.
Yeah, wouldn't criticize him if they did it. Like I said, love the player, but I don't think they're going to want to spend the money. And I think in this particular case, that's justified considering where you're at with your rotation.
Yeah, a lot of walks, doesn't get deep in ball games, and obviously has had some durability concerns, like you mentioned. So I'm very hesitant when it comes to Blake Snell personally, and I think the organization also has its reservations on that front. Yeah. Next question here comes from Ammon. Is Rhys Hoskins a potential pickup to play first base? Might be affordable coming off of an injury. Has career WRC plus above 120. So you mentioned the injury. It's torn ACL. He missed all of this year. It's very possible, especially given the position that he plays, that he's going to have to sign a prove-it deal. And I just can't imagine that a right-handed bat who relies fairly heavily on power output is going to want to sign a prove-it deal to reestablish his market in Seattle. It's been very hard for the Mariners to sign right-handed bats in general. And so in that situation, given the ballpark, the factors of the ballpark, all that, I just don't think that Hoskins will have any interest in joining Seattle on a 1-year deal.
Yeah, they haven't had much luck getting left-handed hitters to sign as free agents here either. So prove-it deals are not something Seattle's gonna, not for power guys, particularly right-handed power guys. Prove-it deals just aren't going to be something that's likely going to work for them. So I like Rhys Hoskins as a target. I think DH first base, like he fits there. But the idea kind of falls apart when you say that, like, oh, you can get him pretty cheap. Not if you're the Mariners. I think, for the Mariners to have a shot, because like if you're Hoskins, you just sign with Philly. You just sign back with Philly for 10, 12 million bucks. And that's a ballpark you like. That's a run scoring environment that you like. That they need a first baseman, all that stuff. It just makes a lot of sense to re-sign there. I think for him to sign with Seattle, I think you might have to give him like 3 guaranteed years, which probably not. So I would say, like, I like the idea. I like where your head's at. It's just a right-handed hitter needing to prove that he's healthy and he can still produce. That guy's not going to have Seattle high on his list. So I don't think you're going to get the type of deal to where it would make sense for Hoskins to sign Hoskins.
Yeah, love the idea of Hoskins. Really like the player himself. I just don't think that it's possible unless you give him something that he just is not expecting to get this winter. All right, we got a few more questions to answer here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. But first, a reminder, this episode is brought to you by Gametime. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Gametime is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. And with killer deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun you'll have. So forget planning months in advance. Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Snag the tickets without the stress with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. Let's get back into your questions here with Andy. Says we actually have a two-parter here from Andy. Thoughts on if/should the Mariners could acquire Jung-Hoo Lee from the KBO? Also bonus, and I get this is specific. Do you think the Rays will let Austin Shenton be eligible for the Rule 5 draft? I would like to steal him back now after cooking in the Rays organization. So on the Shenton thing, I do believe that they will let him go into the Rule 5 draft, or they will look to trade him. And I think the Mariners will have quite a bit of interest in that, given that, according to Ryan Divish, they were pretty close to trading Teoscar Hernandez to the Rays for Austin Shenton at the trade deadline. So, yeah, on Shenton, he's someone that when we do our offseason plan at the end of this month, I think there's a pretty good chance that he's going to be included in that for the reason that I just laid out.
Yeah, I'm a big Shenton fan, so more so than Ty. I think that's always been the case. Like, I don't think I'm wrong there. I think I always had him higher in prospect ranks and all that. I'm a big, Austin Shenton fan. I'm terrified of the idea that the Mariners might trade for him and be like, well, there's our first/third base, insurance, and
he might play second base for us. And all
like that. It's the same problem I have with just being like, oh, Ryan Bliss's second base insurance. Like, no, that's not insurance.
Yeah,
but
he hasn't proven it. Also, he's an older prospect. That's he's doing essentially what he needs to be doing down in AA and AAA.
But what if you trade for him and you give him significant at bats and he's Cade Marlowe and he's just putting a 73 WRC plus? Cade Marlowe didn't help you down the stretch, and I fear Shenton might be the same guy. But I'd absolutely have him back in the org. He's definitely worth a 40-man spot, and he's definitely worth bringing to spring training and giving him a legit shot to make the team. Shenton, I'm in on because I don't think it's going to cost all that much either. But I'm not okay if it's like, well, we have France, we have Gino, and we have Shenton, so we're good on the corners. Like, no, you're not. No, you're not. Keep going. But
so Jung-Hoo Lee, what do you think about him, Colby?
Well, his nickname is Grandson of the Wind, so
which is great.
That's pretty good. His father, of course, is the Son of the Wind, so that's pretty cool. He's an interesting player. Obviously, he's kind of the big international free agent coming through this year. It's an interesting profile. Power has kind of fluctuated up and down in the KBO. He's kind of followed a tradition. He started playing, in the KBO at 18 years old. And every year he's added a little bit more power. He's probably a 15 home run guy at the big league level. Makes a ton of contact, draws walks, pretty good speed, not an elite base stealer or anything like that. He's won Gold Gloves in center field, in Korea, but I think most people believe that he's a corner outfielder, which is great because you need a corner outfielder. So I like the player. I think his bat is actually a really nice fit for Seattle, the ballpark and all that stuff. It's kind of a slasher, doubles, triples, line drives, that type of stuff. Amazing bat control. Even when he chases, he can make hard contact with pitches out of the zone. I think he's a really nice fit. You slide him into left, he's probably hitting first or second at some point. Maybe you ease him in and he hits seventh. I think he could be Yoshida, a very similar type of player. Only he's younger than Yoshida, so there's still more upside play left. But I do think that's the idea. I think he's probably going to look for something roughly in the range that Yoshida got, 590-ish in that range. And based on what I know, and again, I haven't seen him play, I'm just reading reports like everybody else. I'm looking at numbers like everybody else. Based on what I know about him, I would be pretty comfortable offering that. So I'm in, but there are some legitimate questions there, and there are some concerns. And we talk about, go get a proven major league player. He's not. So it's a little bit of you're taking a risk here, but I do like the skill set, and I think he would fit, Seattle quite well for what they need and how the ballpark plays for him.
All right, next question here comes from Gregory. Is $40 million added to the payroll a budget increase that would satisfy you and the fans? Build a good ball club. Doesn't matter what the number on your payroll looks like. The only thing that I ask of the Mariners as far as payroll goes is don't let it be something that hampers you from getting better.
Yeah. The number itself is pretty irrelevant. It's just about, when we talk about the Mariners are being cheap, it's not because, their payroll is at $175 million. It's because they're like, oh, our payroll's at 175. So no, you can't have the extra $6 million to go get this guy to come off the bench or this bullpen guy, even though that guy might put you over the top. Like, that's cheap. And, one other thing I do want to clarify, because of course this is going to come up a lot, throughout the offseason. The luxury tax number and the cash out number are different things. Okay. Remember, the luxury tax is how they calculate that. That is strict AAV. All right. So if you sign, it's not like the NFL, right? Or like you sign a guy in the NFL to 5 and 200, there's guaranteed money and you can cut him after this amount of time. And like, you can kind of fluctuate. Like the first year only makes 12, but the last year he makes 28. It's not like that. If you sign a guy for a 5-year, $100 million contract in Major League Baseball, your luxury tax number is $20 million for the next 5 years. Like, that's what he's counting against. That's different than cash out, because you can pay a guy less in 1 year and then you pay him a little bit more. You can front load or back load a contract all you want, but the luxury tax number is just strict AAV. So remember that, something to keep in mind. It's not, the luxury tax number is kind of the one that people think about, but cash in, cash out is kind of a big one. And the Mariners were bottom 10 in cash out last year, and payroll wise and salary or luxury tax wise, I think they were like 18. So they do need to spend more. But it's not just about like hit 200 million and we're satisfied. No, you don't have to do that.
What does that look like? What does that look like? Because you could go spend just an egregious amount of money and not build an actual World Series contender. I mean, look at some of these other teams that have spent a lot of money and they missed the playoffs this year. Like,
right. I mean,
what ultimately matters here is building a good ball club that can help you win a division, that can help you win a World Series. And so if you do that mostly by trades, whatever, and that doesn't add a ton to the payroll, whatever. But again, if you have an opportunity that presents itself to you this winter where you do have to spend money, but that will make you significantly better, but maybe you need to spend, an extra couple $1 million more than the next person that put in an offer, or you need to give it an additional year or something like that, you should not let that hinder you.
Yeah. And so, I understand the CS spend and all that, and like all the slogans that are going to, and spend money and just spend money. You have to be top 10 in payroll. And it's like, you have to be good. Okay. Right. That you have to build a good baseball team. So would I love for them to spend an additional $40 million on top of what they're already going to have to pay guys who are going to have 100%. Pay increases? Sure. Absolutely.
But I'd love it if they spent $2 more than they're spending right now. It's not my money. I don't care.
Right. But at the end of the day, if they spend $40 million and the players are all Colton Wong, do you care? No, you don't. So for me, there's not a number. I'm not going to, criticize them if they don't hit $180 million. Like, that's not, I just care about who they bring in. That's really all I care about. Players in, players out. Did you get better? And did we hear about like, oh, you could have had this guy, but he wanted an extra $3 million a year over the course of, a 7-year contract. And you said no, like, that's being cheap, and we'll criticize him for that. But like,
100%,
it's different than just being like, oh no, this guy wanted 25 million more and an extra year to sign here. Like, that's different. Those are different things. So it's not about the money per se. It's just about showing commitment to winning the World Series this year. And sometimes that'll manifest itself as spending money. Other times it'll be just getting good players. So, the overall number for me, completely irrelevant.
Yep. And you can mostly add via trade and still add a significant amount of money in payroll as well. So, even if they do prefer that route, doesn't mean that they're necessarily taking the the least expensive route,
Sure.
right? Or they're going the cheap route, right?
Yep.
You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast. Thank you again for making us your first listen here on Mailbag Monday. We got a couple more questions here to answer from you guys. Deep Hanky wants to know, do you agree the Jays are arguably more dysfunctional than the M's? Ross Atkins threw John Schneider under the bus regarding the Jose Barrios decision and retained him as manager. Jays also don't seem to have leaders such as JP Crawford and Cal Raleigh. Seems the M's just need to be willing to spend. Yeah, I wouldn't classify the Mariners as dysfunctional. I would just classify them as incomplete. And so with the Jays, I think the Jays are, I don't know if the Jays are necessarily dysfunctional either. I think they have a moron for a manager who's cost them at least 2 playoff wins potentially here over the last couple of years. But I also think that they're in more of a time crunch right now because they had an opportunity here to take advantage of the window where Bichette is cheap, where Guerrero is cheap. Now those guys are getting close to having to be paid. And while the Blue Jays haven't been scared to spend money, and they've ranked, I think, fairly consistently in the top 10, top 12 in payroll, that is going to take up a significant amount of the payroll that they've been willing to spend. And I just don't know how much they're going to be willing to supplement their roster around that once Vladdy gets paid, once Bichette gets paid. Plus, they're about to lose Kevin Kiermaier, who was a big part of this of their team this year. They're going to lose Matt Chapman, which, whatever, he was terrible after that amazing month of April. But they're going to start losing some pieces here. Guys are going to start to get older, and also Vladdy took a step back. Bo, while he's one of the best shortstops in the league, hasn't been able to stay healthy. Like the guys that are supposed to lead the charge for them haven't really done that, and they definitely haven't come up for them in the postseason. And the fact that they haven't been able to even win a playoff series with this core yet, when they were supposed to be at least a year ahead of the Mariners in terms of their rebuild, that's kind of a failure for them. So I don't know where they go from here, but I don't think that the Mariners are in a similar boat as the Blue Jays. I think the Blue Jays are in a much worse situation. Whereas the Mariners, I think they just kind of took a step back of a year in terms of not making the playoffs, et cetera. But I think they're still very well positioned to do whatever they want for next year and years to come.
Sure. I can't really speak to the Blue Jays dysfunction. I do know their manager is an idiot. I do know that a lot of fans are really upset about the front office and all that stuff. So I can only speak to that. And that sounds like Seattle minus, the manager being an idiot, according to some. It's, I can't really speak to that. I don't think the Mariners are dysfunctional. I think what the reason why a lot of people think they're dysfunctional is more about poor communication skills than it is about actual dysfunction in the baseball ops side of things. So,
right.
I don't think that the Mariners are dysfunctional. So I guess I kind of reject the premise of the question. I think they had a really bad week, following a really bad month. And obviously that's led to a lot of people piling on. But I don't think the Blue Jays are ahead of the Mariners. I think the Mariners window is going to be open longer than the Blue Jays. So I like the health of the Mariners organization much more than I do the Blue Jays at the moment. Even though I'm sure the Blue Jays will be pretty good again next year and probably the year after that, but it's, they haven't taken advantage of that window. And for Seattle, they're still not paying, Gilbert, Kirby, Cal, like Miller, Wu, like they're not paying these guys anything still. And, JP, they're only paying $10 million a year bargain. Like Julio's a bargain right now. So, I don't think the Mariners are dysfunctional. I just think they had a horrendous week, which happened to follow a horrendous month. And so it just makes the whole thing look 10 times worse than it actually is.
Well, and again, when I say incomplete, I'm just talking about the roster. I think the roster was incomplete. I don't think there was a good enough supporting cast, both on the pitching and offensive fronts. And that in part had a negative impact on Scott Service's job and what Service was able to do and not able to do, down the stretch there. So, as far as like comparing John Schneider and Service on that front, I give Service a little bit of leeway on that front just because of that. But yeah, I think, just these issues of like Cal speaking out to the media and Kirby speaking out to the media after the Tampa thing and all, I think those are more isolated issues. I don't think those are long-term issues. And then, you know, we've talked about the press conference ad nauseum. I think that was just poor communication. That's Jerry getting into baseball theory that, you know, most people don't want to hear about, and just a complete failure to read the room. But do I think that that puts them in a worse position than a team like the Blue Jays? No. In terms of like future outlook, no. The Blue Jays were supposed to accomplish a hell of a lot more than they have up to this point over the last couple of years, and they just haven't. Whereas the Mariners, you know, it's been a little bit of give and take, but they've at least been able to accomplish some of their goals here, and I think they're way better positioned to accomplish even more of them than the Blue Jays are. I don't really know where the Blue Jays go from here with their roster build. All right, final question of the day comes from Max. Who are your ideal trading partners this offseason? You mentioned Cleveland and San Francisco. Any others? Tampa Bay, New York, Boston, Colby?
The other 29 teams. Like, you don't exclude anybody. I think San Diego's got some pieces that are pretty interesting. Tampa, of course, has some pieces that are going to be interesting. You know, aside from that, you're not necessarily like targeting teams because they have this, but you're just targeting players and whatever team they happen to be on. That's how you figure it out. So I think there's some interesting fits between Philadelphia and the Dodgers. You know, going one way, but I don't know if the Mariners have what the other side wants. So it's a little tricky, but I think San Diego is a team I'm going to look at. Minnesota is a team that's got some lefty bats that I'm interested in. Tampa, just because always, you know, and so I think you're looking at that. Cleveland. I mean, they have Jose Ramirez, but more importantly, they have Naylor and maybe some arms, some bullpen arms, who might be Eli Morgan, people like that. But yeah, no, I think, you know, you're not excluding anybody, but I do think that the Padres have a few pieces. Tampa has a few pieces. The White Sox, maybe, but they kind of have to want to sell, and it doesn't sound like they want to. San Francisco has a couple of pieces that I'm interested in. But no, you're not excluding anybody, and everybody in baseball has one or two players that you're interested in. Milwaukee has a couple of guys that might make some sense. Like, but yeah, it's you know, it's pretty much Arizona also a couple of guys.
Yeah,
So.
I was going to say Arizona. I was going to say St. Louis. There are a lot of teams that on paper could be a really good fit for the Mariners. Yeah, Baltimore is another one. Yeah,
sure. So
Toronto, as always, like
yeah. I can see that. You're not excluding anybody, right? The Red Sox, like, if somebody's got a player, like, I don't think the Mariners look at the board and be like, well, we line up really well with Baltimore, so who do we like on Baltimore? I think it's more about like, hey, we like this guy, and how do we get him? You know, like, it's a player focus, not a team focus when they're thinking about trades. So
agreed.
I think, you know, again, a lot of the same as you would expect, but San Diego, St. Louis, Baltimore, Arizona, to name a few more.
It does help though when you try and look back and maybe look for some clues here, and you think about teams that Jerry has talked to recently and maybe, you know, have had, you know, some deeper trade talks with, where like both sides pretty much know where like you stand on certain guys, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And that helps a deal come along not only quicker, just a lot more efficiently. Because you might not have to start from the ground up on that front once we get to the off season. So that's always something to keep in mind there as well. So again, like if those Cardinals talks were real, that were being talked about heavily during the summer, maybe those get picked up once, you know, the acquisition period kicks back off here. So so that's really what I look at. But overall, yeah, like Colby said, it's just more player based. You like the player, all right, figure out how you can go get him. That's really it. All right, that's going to do it for us. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast. Colby Patnode, I'm Trident Gonzales. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Dane Gonzalez, that's DANEGNZLZ, and Colby at CPAT11, that's CPAT11. You can also find all that stuff in the description of this episode. And thank you again for making us your first listen. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time Peace.